A €90 million loss, 4 Barcelona managers who gave up, and being written off by many pundits. For 6 years, every coach tried everything to unlock Ousmane Dembélé, but no one succeeded. Then one Spaniard tried something nobody else had done, and 2 years later, that same player scored twice at Anfield and won the Ballon d'Or. So what did Luis Enrique do differently? And why did every manager before him miss it? This is the story of how the hardest man in football fixed the softest career in Europe. Ousmane Dembélé was born in Vernon, Normandy in 1997. By the age of 19, Borussia Dortmund paid €15 million to take him out of Rennes, and within a single season in Germany, he had every major club in Europe watching his highlight reel on repeat. Nobody ever argued about the talent. He was ambidextrous in a way that was almost unfair. He could drive at a defender with either foot, and the defender could never know which one was coming. Quick in short bursts, he could cross, shoot, dribble and pass with both feet at the international level. Scouts used a word for him that scouts almost never use: generational. Barcelona paid €140 million for him in 2017. They had just lost Neymar to PSG. They needed a replacement. They decided that the 20-year-old kid from Dortmund was it. He pulled his hamstring 3 times in his first season. He pulled his thigh. He pulled his calf. There is a story, confirmed by multiple sources inside the club, that Barcelona once sent a car to his house to drive him to training because he kept oversleeping. He was, by several honest accounts, a lovely person. Warm, shy, generous. He was also a complete disaster to manage. Unmanageable. Ernesto Valverde tried. Quique Setien tried. Ronald Koeman tried. Xavi Hernandez tried. 4 Barcelona managers, 4 different approaches, 4 identical outcomes. By the summer of 2023, Barcelona had cycled through managers, presidents and financial crises trying to make it work. They finally concluded that it would not work. Not with him, not here. He was, they decided, simply not the kind of professional a champion needs to be. They sold him to PSG for €50 million, a loss of roughly €90 million in 6 years, which is, if you think about it, one of the more efficient ways a football club has ever burned $100 million. And the football world nodded along. Barcelona had been right to try. Barcelona had been right to give up. Dembélé was a talent without discipline. Gift without grit. A cautionary tale wrapped in a cautionary tale, now being sent to Paris to become somebody else's cautionary tale. His first season at PSG confirmed every suspicion. 14 goals in 62 games. Under a manager he had openly said he wanted to play for, Christophe Galtier, in a league that was, being polite, not exactly the Bundesliga. 14 goals, 62 games. That was not a dip. That was a pattern. That was 5 managers, 3 countries, 9 seasons, and the same damn conclusion every single time. And then Paris Saint-Germain hired Luis Enrique. Luis Enrique Martinez Garcia had spent his entire career being called difficult. As a player, he left Real Madrid for Barcelona in one of the most personally motivated transfers in Spanish football history. As a manager at Barcelona, he won a treble with Messi, Neymar and Suarez. And the stories from inside that dressing room are not stories of a warm and fuzzy man. He is, by every account from every player who has ever worked with him, terrifyingly direct. He does not hint. He tells you. He tells you in front of the group. If you do not like it, he tells you that too. He had taken Spain to the 2022 World Cup, and they were eliminated by Morocco on penalties. He had been called stubborn, arrogant, and out of date. During that tournament, he live-streamed himself on Twitch from his hotel room answering fan questions because Luis Enrique does not particularly care what you think. Paris Saint-Germain hired him in the summer of 2023. Within a year, they would lose Kylian Mbappe to Real Madrid. Within 2 years, they would win the Champions League. The Spanish press warned the Parisians what they were getting. The Parisians assumed they knew better. They did not. The Dembélé confrontation happened in the autumn of 2023, before a Champions League group stage match against Arsenal. The details, eventually confirmed by a Barcelona director years later, went something like this. Luis Enrique had been watching Dembélé in training. Specifically, he had been watching what Dembélé did when Paris Saint-Germain did not have the ball. That was, broadly, very little. Ousmane would jog, he would walk, he would point at teammates as if he were doing tactical analysis rather than pressing. Luis Enrique decided this was the thing. Not the injuries, not the lateness, not the diet, the effort off the ball. Everything else was a symptom. He left Dembélé out of the squad for Arsenal, not benched, not an unused substitute, left out of the 18 for a Champions League night at the Emirates. The reaction was predictable. Fans were furious. Pundits called it self-sabotage. Some inside the club openly wondered if Enrique had lost his mind, dropping the most gifted attacker in the squad before one of the biggest games of the season to prove a point. When asked about it, Luis Enrique did not hedge. He said that if someone seriously fails to meet their responsibilities, they are not ready. He said he had to make a tough call, but he believed it was the best decision for the team, and he would do it 100 times over. Later, when an interviewer asked what the best decision of his year had been, expecting to hear about a signing, a tactical switch, or a famous win, Luis Enrique said it was this one: dropping Dembélé. The Parisian press nearly choked, asking how this could be the best decision when they had been given a €150 million attacker. Enrique simply said yes and went back to his tactics board. What the confrontation looked like from Dembélé's side tells a different story entirely. He had spent his entire professional career being told two things. One, that he was a winger. Two, that his defensive work was developing. That is the coded language football uses when they mean your manager has given up trying. At Barcelona, he had been a right winger who was supposed to stretch play, beat his man and deliver. That was the job. That had always been the job. Pressing was optional, tracking back was optional. His role, Dembélé later said, was to hug the touchline and wait for a one-on-one. Luis Enrique did not want a touchline hugger. Luis Enrique wanted a false nine. The tactical shift was not small, it rewired everything. Dembélé was no longer pinned wide. He was free to drift into midfield, to appear between the lines, to arrive at the back post from angles a defender could not see coming. He was, in effect, given permission to play the way the most gifted players have always wanted to play, everywhere. But there was a price. There was always going to be a price. Press from the front for 90 minutes. When your best attacking player presses from the front, the entire structure behind him works. When he does not, there is a hole at the top of the pitch that the other 10 players spend the match trying to fill. Luis Enrique had seen that hole in the first games of the season, understood exactly where it came from, and decided that the hole had a name. After the confrontation, Dembélé came back. Not a different player, a different professional. He started pressing. He started running. He stopped arriving late. In interviews after the turnaround, he said something that told the whole story. He said that with Luis Enrique, he can play everywhere, as a 10, on the wings, or as a false 9. At Barcelona, he had been more tied to the wing. Now, he had freedom. He had been given freedom, but he had to earn it first. The next time Paris Saint-Germain met Arsenal in the Champions League, the following season at the semi-final stage, Dembélé scored in the 4th minute against the same opponent he had been dropped for to teach him a lesson. Somewhere, the gods of football were taking notes, and they were laughing. June 2024, Kylian Mbappe signs for Real Madrid, and the football world collectively pronounces PSG dead. The consensus was unanimous and, in fairness, reasonable. Mbappe had been the goals, the marketing, the face, the identity. He had carried them into the Champions League semi-finals by himself. He had scored hat-tricks in games PSG had no business winning. Losing him was not losing a striker. It was losing the entire franchise. Luis Enrique asked about it at a press conference. Did the thing Luis Enrique does. He looked at the journalists, paused for exactly long enough to make them think he was being diplomatic, and said he thought PSG would be better without Mbappe. The room laughed. A few reporters actually laughed. 10 months later, that laughter had not aged well. Champions League final, May 2025. PSG versus Inter, 5-0. It remains the largest margin of victory in a Champions League final, which is a statistic that feels like it has to be a typo even when you read it a second time. Dembele provided 2 assists. He finished the campaign with more goal contributions than any PSG player had ever produced in a single European run, breaking a record held by, yes, Kylian Mbappe. 33 goals, 13 assists, 46 goal contributions across the season. The same numbers Mbappe usually put up, from the player 4 clubs had given up on. At the end of the year, he was named the Champions League most valuable player. A few months later, he won the Ballon d'Or. Meanwhile, in Madrid, Kylian Mbappe was scoring goals, winning golden boots, breaking club records, and getting eliminated by Bayern Munich in the quarter-finals, 6-4 on aggregate. He watched the Champions League semi-finals from his couch. Some decisions age like wine, some age like milk, and then some age the way this one aged, which is to say so badly that the other side of it looked not just correct, but prophetic. Mbappe left Paris to win everything, Dembele stayed to become everything, and Luis Enrique, who had been laughed at for suggesting this was possible, simply kept his arms folded on the touchline and his Champions League trophy in the cabinet. Which brings us back to April 2026. PSG are reigning European champions. Dembele is the best player on the planet, an argument that was debatable 6 months ago and is now mostly settled. PSG are drawn against Liverpool in the Champions League quarter-finals, and after a scrappy first leg in Paris, the tie is wide open going into Anfield. Liverpool at Anfield in a knockout match is a specific and unpleasant experience. The crowd does not just support their team, the crowd attacks yours. The place has a way of rewriting history in 90 minutes. Just ask Barcelona, who lost 3-0 there in 2019 after winning the first leg 3-0 at home, in what remains one of the most beautifully cruel nights in Champions League history. Liverpool scored first, Anfield exploded, and then Dembele took over. 2 goals in the second half. Not pretty goals. Killer goals. The kind of goals that exist purely to drain the hope out of a stadium. After the second, you could see it happen in real time. 70,000 people who had been ready to live through another miracle realised at exactly the same moment that tonight was not that night. PSG won. PSG advanced. The player everyone had written off in 2023 had just eliminated Liverpool from the Champions League in their own stadium. On the touchline, Luis Enrique clapped exactly twice. Then he walked toward the tunnel. What Luis Enrique understood that 4 previous managers never did comes down to something simple. Ousmane Dembele was not a talent problem. He had never been a talent problem. He was a standards problem. He had been handled so carefully, praised so loudly, and protected so completely since the age of 15 that he had come to believe his ability was enough on its own. Every single person he had ever worked with had, in different ways, agreed with him. Everyone had tried to unlock him with kindness. Everyone had tried to manage around him. Nobody had tried the simplest and most obvious thing, which was to publicly tell him that his behaviour was unacceptable, and then back it up with a consequence that actually cost him something. It took a Spanish manager with a reputation for being difficult, who had already won a treble, already been fired by a national team, and already stopped caring what the press said about him, to do it. Because only a man who did not need anyone's approval could afford to drop a €150 million star and keep his job. And the truth that nobody in football particularly wants to admit is this: it was not tactical genius. It was not some hidden system. Luis Enrique did not reinvent the false nine. He looked at a player every other manager had tried to coax, and he drew a line, a hard, simple, unglamorous line. Your talent gets you in the building, your attitude keeps you on the pitch. That was it. That was the whole thing. Dembele explained it himself later in an interview. Without prompting, he said Luis Enrique was the first manager who had ever actually made him uncomfortable. And being uncomfortable, it turned out, was the one thing he had never tried. Ousmane Dembele will play in the Champions League semi-finals in a few weeks. The draw has him against Bayern Munich, the same Bayern Munich that PSG beat 2-0 in the Club World Cup quarter-final last summer. A game Dembele ended by scoring in added time, while PSG played with 9 men on the pitch. Luis Enrique described his performance afterward with a single word: exemplary. The man who wrote off 4 clubs. The man Barcelona sold at a €90 million loss. The man who scored 14 times in his first season at PSG is now, depending on the week you ask, the best footballer alive. Luis Enrique was right about the player. The question the rest of European football is quietly asking, and not enjoying the answer to, is what else he has been right about. Because if he was right about Dembele, he was right about Mbappe. If he was right about Mbappe, he was probably right about the press. If he was right about the press, he is probably right about Bayern. Some men bet on talent. Some men bet on systems. Luis Enrique bet on standards. And standards, it turns out, Jules, score twice at Anfield when you need them to.